Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Uttar Pradesh's Parliamentary Affairs and Urban Development Minister and a top leader of the Samajwadi Party made headlines when he said Narendra Modi had met Dawood Ibrahim at Nawaz Sharif's residence in Lahore and that he, Azam Khan, had evidence of this. Most people know that this is utter nonsense. But the sad truth is that there are multiple examples across the political spectrum of politicians who have said equally idiotic or offensive or unjustified things. Indeed, we seem to have a tradition of politicians breaching all red lines of credibility and respectability when they want to attack their opponents. So tonight we ask, why do they do it? What does this tell us about them? Are we also to blame because we accept and tolerate it? And how will things change? My guests are Samajwadi Party leader Juhi Singh, Trinamool Congress MP and former Minister Shaugat Roy, BJD MP and lawyer Pinaki Mishra, BJP National Spokesperson Sambit Patra, Congress Spokesperson C.R. Kesavan, and the well-known columnist and commentator Ashok Malik. Juhi Singh, on Saturday, Uttar Pradesh's Parliamentary Affairs and Urban Development Minister Azam Khan claimed that Prime Minister Modi had met Dawood Ibrahim at Nawaz Sharif's residence in Lahore on Christmas Day, and secondly, that he, Azam Khan, had evidence to prove this. Now, frankly, most people believe this is utter nonsense. What prompts Azam Khan to say such incredibly foolish things?
You are saying that most people believe that it is utter rubbish, and a national leader says that he has evidence that such a thing happens, and nobody comes to take that evidence from me or him. So I would just say that let's not, I was listening to you, let's not say just politicians make irresponsible statements in this context. If he has the evidence, he will hand it over when it is asked, and
no, but just a moment. It's not a question having to be asked. If he makes such a statement, it is his duty to make the evidence available at the same time, not wait to be asked. Why hasn't he done so?
He's made it public. It is also the duty of the various agencies.
He hasn't made anything public, forgive me, beyond the assertion and allegation. He hasn't made the evidence public. He simply made an allegation. This is not a trivial matter. It's a matter of national security. All the more reason to make the evidence public rather than just assert without evidence. That's the point I'm making.
As you started with the presumption that most people don't believe it, maybe he has really sent it to the agencies. Me and you don't know it. He's a responsible national leader. That's all I can say in here.
Well, and yes, he made the statement in public.
I am just saying that
yes, the evidence in private. He's made the allegation in public. It's an attempt to try and undo the good name of the Prime Minister. Surely the evidence should be made public as well. The evidence can't be handled privately.
The Prime Minister is quite able to protect his name and the allegations. Apart from saying all this, sometimes, yes, we do cross the line as public representatives, not just politicians, even bureaucrats, even journalists, talking about, making certain conclusions. But in this context, I would say that it is a matter of national security. He's a responsible
Just a moment. Before you start glorifying utter nonsense as a matter of national security, this is not the first time Mr. Azam Khan has put his foot right royally in his mouth. In December, he claimed that RSS members were homosexual, and he added, and I'm now quoting him, "This is the reason why RSS people don't marry." My question is simple. Is there no limit to the libel and invective that Mr. Azam Khan feels he can freely hurl at his opponents?
My answer is very simple. Is this entire discussion about Mr. Azam Khan, the fact that politicians across parties, yes, sometimes just forget that line between responsible and irresponsible statements. We should watch it, agreed, and many of us do that. So this discussion should not be just about him. Well, I'm glad you're coming around to this line, Juhi Singh. Would you therefore accept that in this instance, when he was alleging that the RSS are homosexual, Mr. Azam Khan said something irresponsible and reprehensible? I have not heard this statement, so I cannot comment on that. I have heard of the last statement, so I am commenting on it.
Sadly, Sambit Patra, the BJP national spokesperson who was meant to be with us, has suddenly and without explanation decided not to join us. I hope he'll join us later. But let me put that point that I was going to put to Sambit Patra to you, Ashok Malik, because the truth, and it's an unfortunate truth, is that when it comes to making silly comments, Prime Minister Modi has made his own fair share as well. In October 2014, he claimed that the story of Karan's birth was proof India had mastered genetic science in time immemorial, and that the story of Ganesh was proof India had mastered plastic surgery. And what's worse is that he made these claims to a gathering of doctors who must have laughed at him, except that they were too polite, I imagine, to do it to his face.
Karan, I didn't quite hear the speech. I read reports about the speech you're referring to, and perhaps Mr. Modi meant that these were perceptions rather than established scientific facts. I'm sure he did. I hope he did. And in any case, to compare those statements, silly as they sound in retrospect, and they certainly sound silly, to an assertion that the Prime Minister of India or the Chief Minister of a state or any elected representative of the government of India met Dawood Ibrahim in a private meeting in Pakistan is preposterous. You can't really compare the two.
I'm not comparing the two as equivalents, but they are both, to my mind, examples of thoughtless, silly, stupid things that people who should know better have gone and said. And for the Prime Minister to have said this at a gathering of doctors must have meant that the doctors would have laughed and said, what on earth is he up to?
I don't quite know what the doctors did, and I wasn't there at that event, and I don't know the context in which the PM said it, whether he meant it as a joke or half jokingly or whatever. But yes, in retrospect, those statements do sound silly. I acknowledge that. But Mr. Azam Khan's statements are not just silly; they're actually dangerous.
Yes,
you are trivializing a battle against terrorism, a battle against organized crime. You're really comparing you're comparing apples and oranges.
I would agree with you that Mr. Azam Khan's statements are dangerous provided you take them seriously, but they're so nonsensical that everyone just laughed them out of court, which is why they've actually ended up diminishing Mr. Azam Khan rather than creating national security questions.
Yeah, but the spokesperson from his party has continued to defend those statements.
Poor thing. Grant that she has a tough job, and she did actually concede. Yes. She did actually concede to my second point about the RSS being called homosexual, that politicians do sometimes have a tendency to say silly, irresponsible things. Mr. Kesavan, the truth is that your party has a fair number of people who open their mouths, speak, and then think later. If you go to the net, there are endless statements by Digvijay Singh that are not just bizarre, but possibly nonsensical. But I'm not going to go into those. I'm going to instead point to your party's Vice President, Rahul Gandhi, who said the following of poverty. Poverty, he said, is just a state of mind. It doesn't mean the scarcity of food, money, or material things. If one possesses self-confidence, then one can overcome poverty. Now, not only is that illogical, but to people who are poor, it's deeply offensive.
Karan, Mr. Rahul Gandhi's commitment and steadfast resolve to be with the poor has been manifestly. I can hear my echo, Karan, please. It has been manifestly, very clearly shown by his actions. So, if to pick out a statement and say that that reflects his viewpoint is extremely wrong. As far as the larger point of the debate,
you're accepting that he said it, and it was a stupid thing to say. Do you accept that? That is a stupid thing to say.
No, I'm saying that I please mark my words, don't put words into my mouth, Karan. Mr. Rahul Gandhi's resolve and steadfast, steely commitment to the cause of the poor is well known.
So that permits him to say poverty is a state of mind. Because he's so committed to the poor, he can say stupid things about poverty. That excuses it. I wish you could question the BJP, which is talking about creating jobs. No, I will question the BJP, but at the moment I'm questioning you, and you are the Congress spokesperson. Is poverty a state of mind?
Yeah, I've answered you in unequivocally clear. Please let us understand that it was Rahul Gandhi who championed, whether it was Manrega or right to food or all these.
So because he champions Manrega, he can say stupid things about poverty,
which were first poo-pooed by the BJP.
So he can therefore say stupid things about poverty.
His action is very manifest. Not at all. He never. If you think, I think it's a very wrong way to assail a leader who has completely shown his commitment
I'm
to
quoting
the
the leader's words to you.
Point, if you just give
Hang
me
on,
a minute.
he actually
See, the
said.
irresponsible statement.
He actually said
I
poverty
told you very
doesn't
clearly.
mean the scarcity
The word
of food, money, or material things. Which begs the question: what then does poverty mean?
The problem here. No, the problem here, Karan. The problem here, Karan, rather than talking about Manrega, where he was there now in Anantpur, when he extolled the virtues of Manrega and how, 14 crore people
So that's the question I'm asking. Because he extols the virtues of Manrega, he can say stupid things about poverty.
You don't focus on that.
That's what you're suggesting, aren't you?
The problem is you don't focus on that.
But I know I'm not. I'm deliberately choosing to focus on his words. And his words here are, forgive me, rather stupid.
Saying not at all. I'm saying that his actions prove mightier than his words, and please let me make my point. I've again reiterated what Rahul Gandhi said and his commitment. Please give me a minute to make a point. See, irresponsible statements are not always inadvertent and unintended. Let us also see there is.
He intended to be irresponsible.
Red herring to
That's
deflect,
even worse.
divert, and
intended irresponsibly is a lot worse than inadvertent irresponsibility.
Karan, you're interrupting only me. Karan, you're only interrupting me.
Because I'm perplexed by what you're saying.
My line of thought. You gave a free run for everybody.
You're making things worse for your leader rather than better.
I don't think that's fair. Not at all. I am just saying you're completely conveniently. You have the Prime Minister. You talked about the Prime Minister's gaps, but why don't you question the Prime Minister's silence when he talks about
just a moment, Mr. Kesavan. Don't deflect the question. It was about your leader, Rahul Gandhi, not the BJP or the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's question was put to Ashok Malik. If you don't want to answer my question, you have every right not to do it, but don't actually deflect. Shaukat Roy, the saddest part, Shaukat Roy, is that your party too, the Trinamool, is full of leaders who seem to open their mouths pretty regularly and put one, if not both feet straight into it. Idris Ali, one of your MLCs in Bengal the other day said, and I'm quoting him, I feel Mr. Modi has links with terrorists.
He's MP, not MLC.
He's an MLC, isn't he?
MP, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha.
Forgive me, then the newspapers were wrong in claiming he was an MLC. He's an even more senior politician, MP, which makes his gaffe even worse. Because what Mr. Idris Ali as an MP said is the following. I feel PM Modi has links with terrorists, which is why the Pathankot attack happened. How do you justify an MP saying that of the Prime Minister?
No, we do not justify. Idris Ali was reprimanded by the party for making that statement. It was an irresponsible statement. He shouldn't have made it. The party has publicly reprimanded him.
I applaud you, Shaukat Roy, for actually not just distancing yourself, which is what politicians conveniently do, but actually going on to say it was reprehensible as a statement, and Idris Ali was reprimanded for making it. Let me, rather forthcoming mood, put to you what Derek O'Brien...
Mr. Karan Thapar, I want to ask you a question. We started with Azam Khan and the statement on Narendra Modi. Why are you broadening
I'll tell you
the
why.
discussion to all
I'll tell you why, because my introduction pointed out that Azam Khan may be unfortunate, but he's not an oddity, that there are politicians in every party who have opened their mouths and said equally stupid things. I've pointed that out about Congress politicians, I've pointed it out about the Prime Minister himself, and now I'm coming to your party. And when it comes to your party, it's not just Idris Ali, but Derek O'Brien called the Prime Minister the butcher of Gujarat. Mamta Banerjee, your esteemed leader, once called the Prime Minister a donkey. Although I know in an earlier show you told me donkeys are terms of affection in Bengal, except that I don't think she meant it as that.
Yes. But let me make one thing clear, that there are two types of statement which can be criticized. One is the sort of statement made by Azam Khan, which is a defamatory statement, which is a preposterous statement made without proof. In the other types of statement, people use language which should not be used. So there is a vast difference between the two. In this case, Azam Khan has made an allegation without proof against the Prime Minister, an allegation which from all accounts is preposterous, unbelievable. So make a distinction between the two.
I accept
and
your distinction.
Don't draw a line across
I
the
accept
political
your distinction,
spectrum
and it's an important
and bring in
distinction. But can I
everybody
ask you
into
this?
it.
Even though I accept your distinction, is it acceptable for Derek O'Brien to say the Prime Minister is the butcher of Gujarat, or for Mamata Banerjee to call him a donkey?
Let me repeat. There is the allegation, it has been there for last 13-14 years, that Mr. Narendra Modi was responsible for the riots in Gujarat. Now, Mr. Derek O'Brien may be accused of using hyperbole, but the charge against Narendra Modi has stuck, that he as Chief Minister of Gujarat either encouraged the riot or could not prevent it.
All right.
So all that Derek O'Brien did was using hyperbole.
All right.
And when
hyperbole is, I can take it a form of speech,
also,
but often
that
from politicians,
is somebody,
it's not really the best way of describing yourself.
We called
but I take your point. Hyperbole is an exaggerated form of speech. Many people indulge in it, and I once again applaud you, Shaukat Rai, for the analytic and clever way in which you have handled my questions. But Pinaki Mishra, the most amazing thing is when I come to your party's leader. The truth is, try hard as we have to find stupid, foolish, thoughtless comments by Naveen Patnaik, there isn't one that I or my colleagues have been able to find. Now, does this prove that Naveen Patnaik is particularly careful and never puts his foot in his mouth? Or does it simply suggest that he's very lucky and the media haven't been around when he's done so? Which is it?
I think you know him much better, Karan, than any of us do. You've known him, what now, 45, 50 years. I think you know that he's got a great sense of wit, very sharp, very biting, very incisive, very British. But he is not prone to gaffes ordinarily. He is not prone to malice. He is not prone to loose talk. So therefore, you will find that I think the brevity that he's often accused of has held him in very good stead in politics. He speaks to the point. You've interviewed him, and you've noticed just how crisp his replies are. And I think that's something that is infectious in the party.
Either it's the fulsome praise you're bestowing on your party leader, or your party leader is very discreet and makes sure that when he puts his foot in his mouth, the press isn't there to see it and record it.
But you've seen most of our party leaders, Karan, you won't find people indulging in loose talk. But that's besides the point. I think the argument is a larger one. And I think I agree with Ashok Malik, with Shaukat Rai, that while there are comments which are irresponsible, which are loose, which are stupid, which are absurd, etc., your question is still valid. That what is the limit of invective and libel in this country? And unfortunately, it is very high. The bar has been set very high because of very lax laws. And that is why a lot of leaders like Mr. Azam Khan get away with what is pure libel, which would be considered libel in any other country and would immediately be reprimanded by the press savagely, I have no doubt. Here the press just reports it very casually.
The press does more than report it casually. Forgive me, let me be honest, the press laps it up and plays it up and converts the person who's spoken into a sort of
absolutely right.
Hero.
You're absolutely. But Karan, unfortunately, this is not just the Indian press, even the US press. Now, you've seen somebody like Donald Trump. He's making hay. The kind of statements he's making, that 1.5 billion
absolutely,
Muslims
but
must be barred from the United
Let's not bring in Donald Trump into our conversation. Let's stick to our politicians. Frankly speaking, we outrival Donald Trump any day when it's a question of putting our foot in our mouth and doing it repeatedly. Let's broaden our discussion. Juhi Chawla, sorry, but my apologies. Juhi Singh, when politicians speak in this way, what do you think it tells us about them? Would you accept that it either shows that they are, forgive my language, uncouth and uncultured, or that they think the Indian people have such low ethical standards, the Indian people will accept this invective? Which of the two is it?
I would say neither. I agree with this fact that most of us, when we are talking to the public, tend to forget that enormous responsibility which weighs on our shoulders, that don't play populist. If you've done something, I've been hearing everyone, and it's something which requires a lot of self-regulation, and every party does have its own self-disciplinary mechanisms. People are reprimanded, people are checked, notices are issued, or people are called up by our top leadership and said that what is wrong or right. But yes, the laws in India are lax, and we do let ourselves get away with a lot of things.
Okay.
So maybe it's time, and time is that we need to self-regulate a lot, and not just again the discussion is again coming back, we all play with words and we are targeting one person, that is one statement, one context. But across the parties, I have always said that statements regarding women, again, many irresponsible statements.
Let's not make this a long answer. The point you're saying is a very good one, that a bit of self-regulation would be required. What that means is politicians should learn when to not speak. Ashok Malik, what does it suggest when the Prime Minister makes claims that stem cell research or plastic surgery was well known to Indians 4,000, 5,000 years ago, or endorses books as he has done, Dinanath Bitra's books I'm talking about, claiming that television and motor cars were available in the Mahabharata time or Vedic times? Isn't he suggesting to people that he's a little gullible, or even, forgive my putting it so strongly, irrational? Isn't that the impression he's giving to people?
I'm not sure where he actually endorsed a book that said that, but perhaps you know better.
Gujarat government
again,
books issued by the Gujarat government when he was chief minister. The preface is from him.
I don't think the books were issued by the Gujarat government, but that's a separate debate. Let's go into that later. Once more, I'd urge you to distinguish what are perhaps badly or clumsily crafted statements. And both Mr. Rahul Gandhi with his poverty statement and Mr. Modi may be guilty of that, or statements that sound silly when taken out of context, and I'm not accusing you of taking anything out of context. I'd urge you to distinguish these from what are plain defamatory statements to do with terrorism, as what Mr. Azam Khan has come up with.
But that distinction we've accepted. I'm asking another question now. I've accepted that distinction. I'm saying when the Prime Minister says, as Prime Minister to doctors, that Indians 4,000 years ago knew stem cell surgery or plastic surgery, is he not suggesting by his own comments that he's gullible and perhaps irrational?
Said that and just that. See, Karan, why I'm hesitant to agree with you straight away, though the statement, the sentence you quoted is obviously a ridiculous statement. And if the PM said that and just that, then obviously it's preposterous. But it depends on the context, it depends on the rest of the speech. Often one doesn't hear the whole speech and one gets only one sentence reported in the newspapers or on television channel and is forced to respond to that. That is why I am hesitant.
All right, except that I will add that the context of the statement was a speech to doctors at the opening of a hospital in Bombay, and the rest of the speech actually had nothing to do with this. So this was the only part of the speech where he made this bizarre claim. And then, hence my question.
If he said just this, I hope he hadn't. I wish he hadn't said it.
Mr. Kesavan, can you take the same line about Rahul Gandhi's comment about poverty, that you wish, given that Rahul Gandhi is dedicated to eliminating poverty and struggling against it, that in that context, you wish he hadn't said this, because this was one of those rather stupid things that will be held against him for a long time to come?
Things can be taken out of context, Karan. It has to be looked in a holistic way, but I would really like you to give me a minute to address the larger question. See, you're looking at many of the statements. Take the example of Mr. V.K. Singh calling the
please stick to Rahul Gandhi and give me Rahul Gandhi's context. Stick to Rahul Gandhi. What is the context in which I should see that
because
statement?
You're not making me make a larger point. I told you, look at things holistically. I have addressed it crystal clearly.
Look at it holistically. Tell me, how should I understand the statement which says that poverty is a state of mind?
You're taking it out. You're taking Mr. Rahul Gandhi. No, let me complete. You're taking his. Please look at the whole speech. You're taking the statement out of context. Holistically looked at it.
What was the rest of the speech about? Go ahead. Tell me. What was the rest of the speech about? I'm inviting you to tell me what was the context of the rest of the speech.
You're the one who's asking the questions. You should have done the homework. You should have done the homework.
That's the problem. You're trying to be a clever spokesman to try and deflect attention without realizing you don't know enough to do so.
Let me make a larger point, because you're not let me make a larger point, Karan. Please let me make a larger point. See, there is also a strange serendipity that many things happen during elections. You have these purveyors of hate suddenly coming out and vitiating the atmosphere. You have a lot of people having inflammatory statements, stoking communal and casteist fires. There are two things which we have to look at a larger context in this debate. First thing is, the Election Commission just issues your notice, and people say it's the heat of the moment, it's heat at the hustings.
No, forgive me. I am not going to be deflected into an entirely different conversation just because you lack the capacity to defend your Vice President, who you know, even if you won't admit, said a very, very stupid, if not damaging thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to stick to my structure. You're not going to deflect me to that extent if I start talking about the Election Commission instead. Let's come to you, Shaukat Roy.
You're taking his word out of context.
I am taking nothing out of context, although you wish I was, because that would be an adequate defense of what Rahul Gandhi said. Shaukat Roy, one of the things that concerns people when your colleagues, Mr. Keshavan, I'm moving on. Shaukat Roy, one of the things that worries and disturbs people when we hear what your colleagues in the Trinamool are saying is that it's so reminiscent of what the people from the CPM who are your opponents you accuse of saying. Or maybe they say it as well, it's not just your accusation. And what people say is there something fundamentally wrong with the politics and politicians of Bengal that they both behave at times and speak at times, and forgive my language because you use this word, like goons? That's the thought that occurs to people, and it's a disturbing one.
Which statement are you referring to, Karan?
Well, I'm talking about Tapas Pal, I'm talking about Idris Ali, and then on the other side there's Anisur Rahman, who once said publicly as a former CPM minister, what compensation would Mamta want for rape? And then there is another comment by another left MP, Anil Basu, who said that Mamta was a prostitute. And I say to myself, why do Bengali politicians who are opponents speak in this way of each other? Is there something wrong with Bengal where this is encouraged, tolerated and accepted?
No, may I say this? Karan, that Bengal still in the whole country has the highest level of political discourse. Just a few comments by stray politicians who are not very important politicians does not mean that the political culture of Bengal is wrong. Bengali culture was represented by people like Dr. Misi Roy and Siddharth Shankar Roy, by people like Jyoti Basu, Professor Hiren Mukherjee, Bhupesh Gupta and Indrajit Gupta.
They are all history,
from both sides,
and they're all dead.
We had very
Talk
tall
about the generation alive and kicking today.
That is the tradition that is still respected in Bengal.
It's not Bengal, followed and observed if you listen to these gentlemen.
Rahman or one Taposh Pal makes the statement. Taposh Pal was thoroughly reprimanded for making the statement. Does not mean that overall level of political discourse, discussion, statements have come down in Bengal. In Bengal, most politicians are better than rest of India, both in terms of probity, honesty, and also the language.
All right. As a Bengali, you have every right to pat yourself on the back if you want. Let me bring in at this point Pinaki Mishra.
Pinaki Mishra, I am proud to be one. I'm not patting myself on the back.
Pinaki Mishra, one of the thoughts that comes to my mind.
Karan,
yes, Dr. Roy.
At this point, may I make an extra statement that when you talked of Narendra Modi's statement about plastic surgery and Ganesh's head, I think it's plain ignorance. Some people, especially of the Sangh Paribar, they mix up mythology with actual science. And that has happened in Mr. Modi's mind.
Dr. Roy, I have to stop you, but let me point out how deliciously biblical, like Jesus, you're saying, forgive them, O Lord, they do not know better. That's what you're saying of Narendra Modi. He does not know better. Pinaki Mishra, one of the things that could be said of your leader,
and again,
who has never, as far as I can research and see, put his foot in his mouth, is that actually at the end of the day, Naveen Patnaik is a stranger who's wandered into the akhara of Indian politics but doesn't really belong there. Is that why he's so different?
There is no question, Karan, that he's a different breed as far as politicians go. He's completely, class apart. He's not your run-of-the-mill politicians, and I think that is the reason he is in his fourth term as a chief minister, heading into, I think, what most people now feel would be a fifth term as chief minister, because he's not your
don't jump the gun. He's got 2.5 years more to finish the fourth term before you, 3.5 years more before you start talking of a fifth term. So don't jump the gun.
I know.
Okay.
Well, he's not your archetype politician. There's no question about that. He is in that sense.
Therefore, a man who's wandered into an akhada where, compared to the others, he's a bit of a misfit. He doesn't really belong to the Indian political type.
But the people like that, Karan. The people like that. The people otherwise see politicians squabbling on a daily basis. And when they see someone who's such a class act in politics, who has so much decorum, who has such a polished demeanor, whose language is so weighed and weighted, I think people like that about him. He's never said an ill word against anybody. He's never cursed anybody. He's never spoken maliciously about anybody.
To say. That's another possibility. He's discreet and clever enough to ensure that when he does say that sort of thing, there are no television cameras and prying journalists around. He may be more discreet than perhaps innocent. But either way, it is a commendable quality because nothing can be held and labelled against him. Let's take a break. A cultured and cultivated man, and I cannot for a moment believe that you would ever use the sort of language we've discussed in part one. How can you convince your fellow politicians that this is not just unbecoming, it diminishes them and demeans our democracy?
The only way to convince them is to do as I'm doing now, criticizing such language and making baseless allegations on the media. I think the media has played a salutary role in exposing unfounded allegations made by politicians and the vituperative language used by politicians. Just as you are doing it, I think repetitively the media does make an attempt to shame politicians who use wrong language, who make unfounded allegations. I think slowly they will come to their senses.
Okay.
After all, no politician who has to face an electorate would like to be shamed in public. This holds true both for the electronic and the print media.
Okay.
And I think, Karan, you are doing a great job in exposing Azam Khan, who I do not know from Adams. I know Mulayam Singh,
I thank you for your compliment.
And I don't know what the importance of this man is, that he is tolerated in spite of making such statements.
He is the Parliamentary Affairs and Urban Development Minister of UP, India's largest state. Let me put the opposite. Let me put the opposite to you, Mr. Keswan. You've just heard Shaukat Roy praise the media for exposing. The opposite is that, do you think the media is culpable for playing up the stupid, thoughtless, irresponsible comments some politicians make, thus giving them publicity, or what Mrs. Thatcher used to call the oxygen of publicity, and therefore the belief that by saying these silly things, they're actually promoting themselves? Is the media culpable also?
There was an old adage which said any publicity is good publicity, but in the 24/7 world of media, any publicity is not good publicity. As far as the fourth estate is concerned, Karan, you have to discern and sieve the kind of statements. There are innocuous statements where you don't need to give undue publicity and dignify them. But there are statements which are deliberate and harmful with malified intent. And the problem is, and I'm stressing this again, especially during the election times, you have all kinds of statements coming out, stoking, communal casteist tension and violence. And these are very critical statements. And the problem here is, you talked about, the leadership of the party condemning it. The issue is sometimes this is hate ventriloquism, because some parties have an, ideology of intolerance where the leadership doesn't speak them, and the so-called fringe elements echo the voices of the leaders, and it's classic hate ventriloquism. And I'll give you an example.
Forgive me, because I asked you a question about the media and you've gone off to another subject, and I need to ensure that we maintain a certain structure. Joy Singh, you said to me that what politicians need to do is regulate themselves. Isn't there also a need for party leaders to point out to juniors that what they've said is wrong? For instance, when Azam Khan repeatedly says these things, shouldn't Mulayam Singh say to him, Yaar, kya kar rahe ho? Had ho gayi hai. Javed Akhtar once wrote a song called Kuch Na Kaho. Hasn't the time come for Mulayam Singh to say to Azam Khan, Kuch Na Kaho, chup raho?
Look, if we are one second. If we are talking of this context, then again I go back to my original stand. The leader thought that it was important. He said it in public. He says he has evidence. Whether he's handed it over, he's not handed it over, I do not know. But the second thing, I agree, it's a vicious circle that we often play up to the galleys or make statements which are irresponsible. And I would not say that this statement, if we start saying this is less responsible, it is more responsible, that doesn't make sense. But yes, the party leaders do this constantly. The senior people do call in all juniors or even seniors, tell them that this is wrong, and it should be a part of the procedure. And the vicious circle is, I think the electorate has become really mature, and they are going to hold us accountable.
Mulayam Singh says to Azam Khan, "Chup raho, kuch na kaho." Pinaki Mishra, some people say,
I'm sure they talk.
I'm sure they do too. Pinaki Mishra, some people say that politicians speak like this because the Indian people either like it or at least don't object to it. Is there therefore an onus on the people of India to repeatedly make it clear to politicians who say irresponsible, silly, unfortunate things, this is not acceptable, and for that to be made clear to them?
You know, public memory is short, Karan, so it's difficult now to, the people in this country only get to speak once in 5 years. So it's very difficult for people to remember, over 5 years what somebody said or not said, unless it's so terribly outrageous that it's shocked the public conscience. So I think it is incumbent on the media, to stop giving oxygen to these kind of people, which is clearly what they want and what they feed on. Number two, I don't believe there has been enough criticism. I believe there has been casual reportage. I believe it's been highlighted sometimes, even not so casually, in fact prominently. But I believe there should be scathing criticism. And that scathing criticism, unfortunately, hasn't happened. I think the media should now, for instance, repeatedly bring him to account and say, where is the evidence? How can you say such a thing about the Prime Minister of this country? Because after all, it's not just Narendra Modi, it's the Prime Minister's office which is at stake here. So I believe the media must repeatedly now question him at every step. Wherever he goes, there must be a mic shoved into his face saying, where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? Where is the evidence?
The great danger is Mr. Azam Khan's face. He'll use it as an opportunity to say something equally irresponsible, but on a different tangent altogether. That's the risk you run. But I want to come back, Ashok Malik, at the end to the example of Naveen Patnaik. He's won 4 consecutive state elections, and his latest victory in 2014, whether at the state or the national level, was the biggest of the 4. Does that suggest that politicians don't need to say stupid things to attract attention and win votes? Naveen Patnaik has been in power consecutively for 17 years without once embarrassing himself, or at least, if he did, no research can dig it up.
2 things, Karan. One, there are very few politicians in India. The 2 national parties, certainly the BJP and the Congress among them, and maybe Mr. Naveen Patnaik is as well, who will be embarrassed by outrageous statements and by media criticism or middle class sensibilities that are offended if someone in the party makes outrageous statements and would want to apologize. I'm afraid many regional parties, the Samajwadi Party among them, will simply not bother, which is why I don't expect anyone from the Samajwadi Party to apologize or explain Mr. Azam Khan's statement. Second, there is a certain type of politician in India, not limited to regional parties, they're found in national parties as well, who believe that each time a mic is shoved before them, it is their duty to make a preposterous statement to be in the news, because this is what people expect of them, this is what the media expects of them, this is what their voters expect of them. And Azam Khan again is part of that prototype. This is going to continue. I don't think this is ending in a hurry. There is an ancient Indian tradition called the Maun Vrat. I do wish our politicians learn to adhere to it, but I can't see it happening.
Very quickly, Shaugat Roy, because you've been the most honest of politicians that I have encountered for a long time, I'm going to leave you the last word. And I've got only 20 seconds, sir, so you have to be very, very brief. Do you see things changing?
No, will you please repeat the question?
Do you see things changing, or are politicians going to continue the way they have been? 20 seconds is all we've got.
No, I think things will I see things changing. There is universal condemnation of all unfounded statements and of scurrilous language used by politicians. And I think the normal common voter even though he may clap at a meeting, does not ultimately condone use of vile language or making of unfounded allegations.
And perhaps the ordinary voter should show that with the way he votes.
If the public remains vigilant, if the NGOs remain vigilant, I am sure that things will change for the better.
All right, I'll let you have the last word, Dr. Roy. My thanks to all my guests for joining me, and my apologies that Samajwadi Party didn't join us. I'm told that he's stuck in a meeting with the Defence Minister where the rest of the BJP cabinet is also present, and therefore he's been unable to leave, as a result of which he was forced to let us down. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.